The specimen did not die. That was the first anomaly. Surrounded by cold metal and sterile light, it sat upright, chest rising and falling in a rhythm far too stable for something that should have perished minutes ago. Subject 117, a carbon-based organism from a minor blue planet designated Sol 3, had been introduced into the atmospheric deprivation chamber precisely 17 minutes earlier. The atmosphere had been vacuumed to less than 0.03% oxygen saturation, temperatures reduced to cryogenic thresholds. According to every recorded experiment on analogous species, cerebral activity should have ceased by minute 5, but the human was still breathing. It even blinked. The observing aliens, known to each other by code glyphs, lacked facial expressions, but among them, the silence vibrated with something they hadn't felt in centuries: curiosity. The lead analyst, Zeltar, leaned forward. It had never seen a mammal resist environmental collapse without prosthetics or augmentation. Increased neural probe sensitivity. It ordered, voice like split glass. Another flicker from subject 117's brainwave patterns. Gamma oscillations. Dreaming. Mara Lee was dreaming of rain. Not just any rain. Her grandfather's porch in coastal Oregon. The exact pitch of drops hitting tin roof. The scent of earth and cedar. It came to her not as memory, but as sanctuary. In the void, in the silence of this impossible chamber, she recalled the way the world used to smell before she left it behind to climb aboard the exploration ship Veritas. She remembered the names of every crewmate she had lost when the alien beam had cracked their hull in half. One tear, hot and uninvited, carved down her cheek. They thought she would scream. Panic. Collapse. They did not understand that human endurance was not defined by muscles or breath or blood, but by the things it chose to carry. The second anomaly followed soon after. "She is singing," one of the technicians said, uncertain if the translation was accurate. A low, vibratory pattern modulated through the throat. Analyze it. The program required several seconds, then rendered its translation on the terminal. You don't know what it's like slash to fight and bleed and break slash and still choose to rise. A fieldhymn, possibly martial in origin. The notes rode on frequencies evolved for emotional resonance, something the analyst could measure but not comprehend. The room filled with quiet reverence. A creature meant to die was singing. Mara opened her eyes. The walls remained the same, circular, metallic, slick with artificial frost. But something had changed in her. She'd always known that the first human captured would have to be more than soldier, more than survivor. She would need to be an emissary of something deeper. She just hadn't realized until now that it would come down to her. She inhaled. Her throat was raw, but the singing had helped. She felt less alone. She'd been cold before. She'd known pain. But isolation, this deliberate severing from sensory anchors, was worse. Still, they underestimated one thing. Mara had practiced being alone since she was 6 years old. "They don't know what I'm made of," she whispered. The scientists, meanwhile, debated whether to escalate. Logical models suggested that she was exhibiting signs of denial-induced cognitive malfunction, that she might be hallucinating memories, which provided biochemical stimulation sustaining her life functions longer than anticipated. Zeltar disagreed. There is no degradation of higher-order reasoning in her frontal cortex. She is not delusional. She is adaptive. To most of the observers, this was not a desirable trait. Adaptive meant unpredictable, and unpredictability was danger. They initiated the second part of the observation protocol. Mara didn't react when the temperature dropped further. She barely flinched when the light flickered out. She curled into herself, eyes closed, seeing constellations behind her lids. Then a new sound, the hiss of compressed gas, the rise in atmospheric pressure. Breathing became heavier, denser. Her lungs began to strain. She counted heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. She remembered her training. Every space cadet knew how to survive vacuum reentry, sudden depressurization, emergency chamber malfunctions. But this wasn't a malfunction. It was deliberate, cold and calculated. Her body began to ache in strange places, deep behind the eyes, around her joints. Nitrogen narcosis? She smiled bitterly. So they were trying everything. The pain came in steady waves. Still, she didn't scream. They watched baffled. Her cortisol levels were elevated, certainly, but so was oxytocin. Was she bonding? Zeltar read the logs with confusion. What was she bonding to? Mara didn't know herself. Perhaps the memory of the Veritas Bridge, her command chair, the sweet voice of the ship AI she had spent 2 years personalizing. Perhaps the Earth, with its flaws and noise and dirt. Or perhaps their father's last words, whispered to her before the first jump mission. When they look at you, let them see all of us. She gritted her teeth and began whispering the names of the dead. Ramirez, Singh, Leora, Thompson, Burnside. Her voice cracked. The whisper became a chant. Each name etched into her like stars across a black sky. She made herself into a constellation. In the lab chamber, a sharp tone rang out. Alarms flared. The data stream was unstable. Her brain was reaching thresholds of neurochemical output that had no precedent in alien records. She should not be capable of this. One hissed. She's human. Zeltar said quietly. We were wrong about them. No one replied. No one wanted to. Back in the chamber, Mara slumped to her knees, sweat glistening across her brow. But she was alive. Every breath a rebellion. The aliens watched. They didn't understand how close she was to breaking. And why she didn't. Because Mara had already decided something. If she was going to die here, she would die whole. They could strip her senses, torture her nerves, cut off her connection to light, warmth, even language. But they couldn't remove her will. Will wasn't a thing you found in bloodstreams or neural matrices. It was a thing that kept you standing when everything else failed. Let's begin testing limb resilience, one of the researchers suggested. No, Zeltar said sharply. Heads turned. This is no longer an experiment. It's a warning. What do you mean? Zeltar turned back toward the glass where Mara knelt, whispering again, perhaps to ghosts, perhaps to them. I mean, it said, we may not be observing her. She may be observing us. There was a pause. Outside the glass, Mara lifted her chin. Her eyes met the observation lens. And for the first time in recorded alien history, an experimental subject smiled back. Pain was the second language of war, and Mara Lee was fluent. The restraints bit into her wrists as the second phase began. No sedative, no mechanical explanation. Just a silent drift of motionless gravity as cold metal clasped around her arms, legs, neck. The chair they had affixed her to was engineered without cruelty, its design clinical, not sadistic. But the effect was the same. Immobilization, isolation, examination. She could feel their eyes, invisible yet ever present, dissecting her movements with inhuman precision. Every tremor, every breath. Every constriction her pupils fed into their vast analytical systems. She gritted her teeth as a current of heat bloomed across her chest, an invisible radiation that sank through her skin like sunlight turned poison. She didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She knew it was a test, a simulation, a probe into the boundaries of biological tolerance. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that human endurance didn't begin where the pain stopped. It began precisely when a mind whispered, you can't go on, and something deep inside responded, watch me. Somewhere, just behind the pain, Mara imagined herself elsewhere. She was in the cockpit again, fingers curled around a control yoke, stars streaking past the reinforced glass. Leora was in the co-pilot seat, chewing on freeze-dried mango slices, her laugh full of careless gravity. The ship rocked, not from a malfunction, but from the turbulence of memory. Mara focused on Leora's voice until the heat faded, not because the machine stopped, but because her mind refused to give it dominance. The scientists were troubled. Her dopamine response is increasing, one noted. That should be impossible, another replied. It suggests she associates suffering with growth, or purpose, or defiance, Zeltar murmured. The next stimulus was cold. Absolute zero flushed through the walls of the chamber. Mara's breath crystallized before her lips. Her muscles screamed, locked in microspasms. But she did not weep. She did not plead. Instead, she laughed. A hoarse, ragged sound, more breath than voice. "Is that all you've got?" she rasped. The aliens did not understand the meaning, but they understood tone. They understood the implication. Their third simulation was designed to mimic deep space compression trauma. A simulation of gravitational instability that would collapse the lungs of most mammals. Mara's eyes rolled back, her vision tunneling. Every rib felt like it was being crushed inward, spine trembling under an invisible weight. Still, she endured. They paused the test. "I do not understand," one of the younger researchers confessed, voice sharp with irritation. "Her biology is crude, unevolved." "It's not her biology," Zeltar said. "It's what drives it. What drives it cannot be measured." Perhaps that's the point. Inside the chamber, Mara hung limp in her restraints. Her body was a map of bruises, minor ruptures, raw nerves. But her mind was on fire. She remembered the first time she disobeyed an order to save a civilian. The tribunal had threatened her career, stripped her of rank for 6 months. But she had saved that family. A child with wide, terrified eyes who had clung to her leg like it was a lifeline. The child's name had been Ash. "I'd do it again," she whispered. It wasn't defiance. It was declaration. The lights in the chamber flickered. To the aliens, it was a system error. To Mara, it was momentum. When they began again, the stimuli changed. No longer pain. No longer deprivation. Instead, they initiated full sensory hallucination protocols, feeding signals directly into her auditory and visual cortices. Fabricated voices, simulated faces, false memories rendered in high definition. The first voice was her mother's. "I'm disappointed in you, Mara." Then her father's. "You weren't strong enough to save them." Then Leora's. "You left me behind." Each phrase was designed to elicit maximum emotional collapse. But Mara recognized the lies. Her mother had died when she was 12. Her father had never raised his voice to her. Leora had died before Mara even knew she was missing. "You're fishing in the wrong sea," she said aloud. The hallucinations twisted, became more grotesque. Her own face, split down the middle. Her hands, covered in the blood of innocence. She closed her eyes. Let them speak. Let them play. She knew who she was. When the images faded, Mara opened her eyes and smiled. "Your tech is impressive," she said to no one. "But your imagination is garbage." Outside, the analyst stared. She's rejecting stimuli. Her cognitive framework is adapting in real time. That should not be possible. Not without assistance. "There is no assistance," Zeltar said. "Only memory." It was then that Mara did something unexpected. She began to talk to them. Not screams. Not curses. A conversation. "I know you're out there. Watching. Measuring. Cataloging my suffering. You think this is science. But you're not studying me. You're studying yourselves." She paused. Her voice, though weak, carried conviction. "I'm a mirror. Every test you run, every reaction you expect. I know what you're looking for. Weakness. Submission. But here's the thing about humans. We get stronger in the broken places." She tapped her chest with her chin, the only movement her restraints allowed. "You want to know what I'm made of? This." Her words echoed in the sterile silence. The translators struggled, uncertain whether her meaning was metaphor or threat. The answer, as always with humans, was both. Zeltar found itself watching the footage not for data, but for something else. It did not have a name for it. Fascination? Dread? Subject 117, Mara Lee, was no longer a test subject. She was becoming a legend. They upgraded her security clearance, increased biometric surveillance, restricted unsupervised data access on her case file. The specimen was becoming dangerous. Inside the chamber, Mara slept, lightly, warily. Her dreams were no longer of Earth, but of escape, of strategy. She was learning their rhythms, their machines, their patterns of observation. She understood now that the tests would not end, because they did not want them to end, because to stop would be to admit failure. So she began planning, not out of vengeance, not even for survival, but because somewhere in the cosmos there might be another ship, another human, another child, and if this was a first contact, it had to count. She would teach them what humanity meant, and then, when they finally understood, if they ever did, she would find a way out. But not yet, not while they still believed they were in control. She closed her eyes and waited. The next test would come soon. She could feel it in her bones. And when it did, she would be ready. Darkness wasn't the absence of light anymore. It was the presence of control. Mara sat silently in the corner of her containment unit, the temperature unnaturally regulated. The artificial gravity a constant reminder that nothing here belonged to Earth. She was monitored even in rest, but she'd long stopped caring about their scrutiny. She had moved beyond survival. Now she waited. It had been 3 days since the last test. No pain, no sensory illusions, no probing dialogue from their synthetic interface. The quiet unnerved her more than the interrogations. Something had changed. Either they were afraid, or they were preparing something final. Zeltar reviewed the logs again. He had watched every recording of Mara Lee. Each segment, each scan, each verbal log. He no longer viewed her as an anomaly. She had become something else, a disruption to his framework of belief. She was a variable that did not bend under pressure. He had seen battle-hardened species shatter under less. But this woman did not break. She learned. She adapted. He approached the others on the High Convergence Council. She is no longer a subject. She is becoming a signal. To what? One asked. To others like her. If we misjudge her now, we do not contain a human. We provoke a species. They dismissed him, of course. To them, she was still carbon and water, a deviant among primitives. But Zeltar had lived long enough to know when something profound had entered the fabric of history. This wasn't just resilience. It was evolution, and it was happening right under their gaze. In her cell, Mara stood. Slowly, deliberately, she walked a wall that had never responded to her before. This time, it hissed faintly, acknowledging her presence with a soft pulse of blue light. They were listening. Who's in charge now? She asked. There was a pause. Then the wall shimmered. A projection of Zeltar formed, not quite physical, not entirely digital. I am. You know I'm not staying here. I suspected as much. Then why haven't you tried to stop me? We are not yet certain how. It was the first honest exchange they'd ever had. She studied the image of the being who had orchestrated her trials. His body was elongated, eyes crystalline and unblinking, but his voice was subdued, almost reverent. I wasn't supposed to make it this far, was I? No, you were meant to fail. We miscalculated your thresholds. Mara stepped closer. It's not about thresholds. You don't get it. You've never faced extinction with a smile. You've never stood in the ashes of your own world and said, try harder. That's what we are. You are inefficient. Your civilization is fragmented. Your biology weak. And yet I'm still here. Zeltar didn't reply immediately. We could learn more. Peacefully. You had your chance at peace, she said. You chose dissection over dialogue. A flicker of silence stretched between them. Then what do you want? He finally asked. She looked around, eyes sharp. To leave. On my terms. And you're going to help. Impossible. You are monitored. Weaponless. She smiled. That's what you think. She tapped her temple. You've been studying my body, but you never asked what I've been doing with my time. Across the station, unnoticed by the rest of the crew, tiny anomalies began accumulating. Microstatic disturbances, electromagnetic flutters, interference within non-critical subsystems. Mara had learned their systems from within, not through hacking, but through rhythm, observation. She had become a human key, sinking to the pulse of their structure. You're not the only ones who can evolve under pressure, she said. Zeltar's projection faded. The lights dimmed. Across the vessel, emergency systems began to stutter. Containment fields surged. Mara closed her eyes and listened. She could hear the tremor in the walls. It was time. Doors hissed open, some by her manipulation, others simply failing under the rising anomalies. Mara didn't run. She walked, controlled, purposeful. Alarms blared in languages she didn't understand, but the chaos was universal. Her cell had been near the lower quarters, beneath the research wings and data cores. She made her way upward, passing confused engineers and scientists who barely registered the figure moving through the smoke. They had never expected her outside the cage. They had no protocol for it. In the command chamber, Zeltar overrode the automatic lockdown. "She's initiating a cascading system fracture," one assistant shouted. "If it spreads to the core, she won't destroy us," Zeltar said quietly. "She wants out. She wants them to know." Them? Zeltar turned, eyes distant. The other humans. Mara reached the ship's NAV hub. It was more alien than anything she had seen, an interface of thought rather than code. But she had studied enough. She placed her hand on the orb, letting her intent bleed into the system. A pulse spread, a beacon formed, and then it launched. A signal, compressed data, visual logs, medical readings, communications. It all shot through space, encoded in a language no machine could decode easily. But when a human mind, perhaps another soldier, perhaps a child dreaming of stars, might hear. She turned to see Zeltar entering the room, alone, unarmed. "You've won," he said, not bitter, just resigned. "This wasn't about winning," she replied. "It was about being seen." "Then what happens now?" "That depends on you." He hesitated. "We were wrong about you." "No," she said, stepping past him. "You were wrong about us." The station trembled, not with destruction, but with transformation. The systems began recalibrating. Automatic defenses powered down. Doors unlocked. Lights softened. In the control room, the council watched in silence as the ship shifted, its perimeter restructured. Mara Lee had not escaped. She had changed the rules. She stopped at the viewport, staring out into the void. Somewhere out there, her signal traveled. It might take months, years, but it would reach Earth, or another outpost, or someone who would understand. She wasn't the first to be captured, but she would be the last to be ignored. Behind her, Zeltar spoke again. "What are you really made of?" She turned. Her eyes burned with the light of every trial, every loss, every inch of defiance still etched into her bones. "Hope," she said. And then, for the first time since her arrival, she walked forward, unchained, unafraid, toward whatever came next.